Merry Christmas. Happy Christmas Day. Hope your presents are nice. Hope your family is all warm and united. If you're watching this and your children are fighting in Afghanistan, I hope that they're safe, and I hope that they can share Christmas with you in their imagination and in their love. This week, I've been doing a series of videos on American history. And last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about Washington's first term under a video called The Emergence of Parties. And yesterday, we talked about the beginning of Washington's second term, covering the Whiskey Rebellion. And now we'll talk about the last years of Washington's presidency. We're now around 1795 and 96. This was a period where it looked very much as if we were going to be at war with Britain. The Revolutionary War really never ended. The United States, the newly independent colonies, signed a treaty with Great Britain. And in the treaty, Britain promised to turn over its forts, Fort Detroit and some of the other ones in that region of Michigan and Ohio, turn them over to the Americans. They never did. To stop inciting Indian attacks, they continued to incite them. And they were also taking our men at sea, forcing them onto British ships, claiming that they were escaped British sailors. And the causes of possible war just mounted and mounted. And this was played against the backdrop of an international world war. This was no Cold War. Britain and France were in a death struggle with each other between Napoleon and the British over who would dominate the world. And in fact, it was really a fight before Napoleon arrived between democracy and monarchy. Napoleon became an emperor and eliminated that. But in the 1790s, this was still a fight between democracy and monarchy. The British were trying to extinguish the French Revolution, and they were aided by the kings of the rest of Europe. And it was a war that the United States could not afford to be involved in. We didn't have any army. We didn't have any navy. We'd completely disarmed after the American Revolution. We only won the revolution with the aid of the French army, which obviously had pulled out. So the possibility of a war with Britain really scared President Washington. He thought we'd lose it. He thought it would reverse the revolution. And he knew as a military guy we were in no shape to fight a war. So he took the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Jay, and he sent him over to Britain to negotiate a treaty with the British. And Jay basically was in a very weak position because the British knew the U.S. couldn't defeat them in a war. And he basically handed over the store. He gave Britain most favored trading status. The British said, we're going to vacate the forts and we'll stop the Indian attacks. But that was stuff they'd already obligated themselves to do in the Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution in 1783. So when this treaty is being negotiated in 1795, thanks a lot. You're giving us what you've already promised to do. But otherwise, it really locked the United States into the British commercial system. The U.S. became part of the British trading empire, giving Britain preferences, British ships preference, and really making the United States functionally today, we would call it the part of the British Commonwealth. Well, when the treaty hit the United States, all hell broke loose. Jefferson led the fight against it. Madison did. They all said this is a total capitulation to the British. This is a total surrender to Britain. And it really was. It was Washington avoiding a war with Britain. So as Washington's term ended, there was a furor over this Jay Treaty, tremendous opposition to it, and a real worry on the part of the Jefferson Republicans that the British would increasingly come to dominate the United States and take over. It was in this context that Washington gave his farewell address, calling on the U.S. to avoid entangling alliances, both with Britain and with France, and proclaiming neutrality and isolationism. That address has often been cited, but we have to put it in the context of a nation with no military, totally unprepared for war. Well, the Jay Treaty linked us so close to Britain that now that there was no longer a danger of a war with Britain, there was a huge danger of a war with France. And that's how the Adams administration started. We'll talk about that in tomorrow's video. Merry Christmas again.